When Sarah sat across from me at dinner that night, I could tell immediately that something was wrong. She barely touched her food, pushing it around the plate as if she were trying to avoid saying what she really wanted to. Her shoulders were tense, her gaze fixed on the flickering candle between us. Finally, she drew in a shaky breath and said quietly, "I think we need to talk about our marriage. I want us to try an open relationship." The words sliced through the silence like glass breaking. For a second, I just stared at her, not because I didn't understand, but because I had half expected this moment to come. And yet it still hit me like a punch. For months, I had noticed her subtle distance. The late-night messages, the mysterious work dinners, the way she'd roll away from me in bed. I'd known she was restless, maybe even curious about other men. But hearing her say it out loud made it real. I didn't speak right away. I just studied her face. She looked uneasy, yes, but there was a spark of confidence in her eyes too. It was the kind of calm that comes from rehearsing something for a long time. I could tell this wasn't a whim, it was a decision. "Why?" I asked finally, keeping my voice as even as I could. She began her explanation, a soft, practiced speech about freedom, about love not being ownership, about how relationships should evolve. To her, it sounded enlightened, progressive even. To me, it sounded like betrayal dressed up in philosophy. She was trying to justify walking away while pretending to stay. What she didn't know was that I had already left her in my heart long before this dinner. The distance she created, her coldness, her constant absences, her lack of affection, had hollowed out our marriage until there was barely anything left. And in that emptiness, someone else had quietly entered my life. Someone who laughed with me, listened to me, made me feel seen again. So I sat back, watching Sarah talk about exploration and emotional growth, and I realized the irony of the moment. When she finally paused, waiting for me to react, to argue, to plead, to moralize, I simply said, "That's fine, Sarah. But you should know, I already have a girlfriend." Her fork clattered against the plate. For a heartbeat, she looked at me like she hadn't heard correctly. Then she let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You're joking," she said, her voice trembling. I didn't respond. I just met her gaze, calm and steady, until her laughter died in her throat. You're serious?" she whispered. When I nodded, the color drained from her face. "So you've been cheating?" she accused. I tilted my head slightly. "You call it cheating," I said evenly. "I call it surviving the emptiness you left behind." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us was thick with things that could never be unsaid. Then her shock turned to fury. "Who is she?" she demanded. "That doesn't matter," I replied. "What matters is you wanted freedom, and I took mine." Her hands trembled as she slammed her fork down. The control she had always wielded over me was slipping away, and she could feel it. For years, she had been the one dictating the rhythm of our lives. She made the big decisions, managed the finances, shaped our social circle. I had learned to bend, to adapt, to keep the peace. But that night, for the first time, the balance shifted. Over the next few days, the house turned into a battlefield. One moment, Sarah was furious, accusing, shouting, slamming doors. The next, she was apologizing, begging for another chance, insisting we could fix things. But deep down, we both knew there was no fixing this. She had wanted to open the door, and I had already stepped through it. What unsettled her most wasn't the betrayal, it was the loss of control. She wanted the freedom to explore, but she didn't want me to do the same. She had expected me to stay, waiting, faithful, while she experimented. Instead, I had found something real, something that made her version of freedom look hollow. My girlfriend was kind and grounded. With her, there were no games, no power struggles. Just warmth, laughter, and peace. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I had to earn affection. I felt chosen. When Sarah's friends learned what happened, opinions split like lightning. Some sided with her, painting me as a traitor. Others quietly admitted she'd brought this on herself. The truth, as it always does, eventually settled somewhere in the middle. But by then, it no longer mattered to me. Eventually, Sarah filed for divorce, expecting I'd fight it, that I'd beg her to reconsider. Instead, I signed the papers without hesitation. When I sent them back, I felt something lift inside me, A lightness I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Real honest freedom. Months later, I saw her by chance at a cafe. She was sitting alone, staring into her cup, her shoulders hunched. When she saw me, she tried to smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. She looked older, wearier. I nodded politely, then turned to leave. My girlfriend, now my fiancé, was waiting by the door, her hand slipping easily into mine. As we walked out together, I realized that Sarah's attempt to reshape our marriage had, in a strange way, saved me. Her desire for freedom had forced me to face the truth that love without respect isn't love at all. What she thought would unchain her ended up freeing me instead. And in that quiet moment, I understood something simple but profound. Sometimes the ending that terrifies you most is the one that sets you free. For me, that night at the dinner table wasn't the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of my life.